We're joined by a very smart guy, Miles Kristen, reaching us from Madison, Wisconsin. He is with Wisconsin International Radio, and we appreciate him being here. Miles, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's hear a little bit from Donald Trump in London earlier.
Never even thought about it.
Okay, he's being asked about NHS, the National Health Service in Britain, and whether or not he's going to try to destroy it if there's a post-Brexit deal between the United States and the UK.
Things really running well, and if we get elected, if we take the House, keep the Senate, keep the White House, we'll have phenomenal health care. But right now, we've made it very good, and we have 180 million people on plans that they absolutely love, private plans that they absolutely love. But in this country, no, they have to work that out for themselves. We have absolutely, I don't even know where that rumor started. We have absolutely nothing to do with it, and we wouldn't want to. If you handed it to us on a silver platter, we want nothing to do with it. So I'll stay out of the election. You know that I was a fan of Brexit. I called it the day before. I was opening up Turnberry. The day before Brexit, you were there. Many of you were there. I mean, I recognize that many of you were there. And they asked me whether or not Brexit would happen. I said yes, and everybody smiled and they laughed. And I said, yes, it's going to happen, in my opinion. It was just my opinion. The next day they had the election, and I was right.
Well, no shortage of braggadocio there by the president, but this is Trump. Either you love that sort of thing, and I happen to think it's great. I think it's refreshingly honest on his part. There's certainly no shortage of bombast there or braggadocio, but that's Trump for you. But he's got I think he's got some fair points to make on the issue of military funding while he's in London, saying that you guys are not carrying your weight. He has come up with some deals with countries like Canada, but at the end of the day, you were asking me about why it is that we don't have the same levels of debt up here as the United States does. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to defending this country. We know that if we get in any trouble, Miles, you guys are going to have to come to our rescue because Lord knows we don't have the military to defend ourselves.
Well, and the private contractor and companies, the military defense contractors, I mean, they take advantage of the government so much and have been doing for decades and decades and decades of overcharging and, backroom deals, and, it's the revolving door between politicians and people working in those sectors and the cronyism, and there's just so many billions and billions and billions of wasted dollars that go into defense spending.
Yeah, and the result is $23 trillion debt. I mean, yeah. The country is, I hate to say bankrupt, but I don't see how you're going to recover from something like that. And your deficits are bigger than our debt. Like, you know what I mean? Like your annual deficits are bigger than our national debt.
It's military is a huge part, if not one of the biggest parts. Our entitlement spending. There's a lot of reasons why we're in debt, and we never really even get into the whole issues about Federal Reserve or fiat currency or how the banking and treasury system in the United States work. But it's like if you looked back to the founding fathers and all the people, hundreds of years ago who were adamantly opposed to the idea of how we run our monetary system in this country, it's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I guess in London he's picking a fight with, or maybe the French have picked a fight with America. But I guess the deal is they want to come after the tech companies. They want to tax Google. They want to tax Amazon and Facebook. Go after some of these tech companies. And the president is coming out and saying, well, no, you don't. No, you do that. We're going to hammer you with taxes of our own. We're going to hit your wine and your cheeses, all the stuff that, all those products that we love to get from France. And so there's that's kind of the cloud hanging over the NATO meetings now. It's not so much, it's partly the military stuff, but it's trade now. And the thing about what's going on with China is that the Europeans now see what's going on between Trump and the Chinese. Now with Trump coming out and saying, well, you know what, maybe I'll wait until after the 2020 election to cut a deal with the Chinese. I don't have to do it right now. boom, the markets are getting hammered today. But what it tells the Europeans, I think, is that this guy means business. If he's willing to do that to the Chinese, he's willing to do that to us.
Yeah, and as far as the tech companies, I mean, there's no doubt they have a serious bias against conservatives, and sometimes the tech companies are also attacking the more anti-war people on the left, things like that. You can see censorship on both sides, but the tech companies, it's like, are they really private companies, but they take in public money and they get subsidies and a lot of tax dollars going to these tech companies. So there is a fair debate about whether or not to regulate them in some aspect.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe some of these countries have a point, but Trump is coming out and saying, well, wait a minute, there are companies. If anybody's going to go after them, it's going to be us. He says, I'm not a big fan of Google, not a big fan of Facebook. And he says, well, I'm doing okay on Twitter, but at the end of the day, you don't touch these guys. I'm going to touch them. It's like this kind of almost mob type of thing, going on. Hey, that's my territory. Back off. And so he's now threatening the French with, I think it's $1.5 billion in tariffs. But I mean, it's you wonder, is this stuff thought out, or does he just come up with this stuff because he, kind of wakes up on the wrong side of bed in the morning? You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt with Trump, a lot of it is spur of the moment, and some people think he's this grand chess master and everything, and it's like, no, he might be a lot smarter than some of the Democrats, but that's pretty. That's not a pretty.
That's not saying
much. Pretty high bar to go over.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's smarter than our guy up here. I mean, who got a meeting with Latvia. I was kind of laughing about it a little bit because, our Justin Trudeau managed to. It's a 2-day summit with 29 members, and we get to meet with Latvia, which isn't exactly a huge player. The colleague of mine was mentioning that, well, we do have some troops in Latvia, but as far as I know, we're not planning on removing those troops. But meanwhile, Trump is meeting with with the big guys. Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say, because he took a shot at Emmanuel Macron after Macron criticized NATO as being, quote unquote, brain dead.
We've got things really running well, and if we get elected, if we take the House, keep the Senate, keep the White House, we'll have phenomenal health care.
Well, right now,
we've made it very good, and we have 180 million people on plans that they absolutely love, private plans that they absolutely love.
He gets on to the brain dead time a little later on.
They have to work that out for themselves. We have absolutely, I don't even know where that rumor started. We have absolutely nothing to do with it, and we wouldn't want to if you handed it to us.
I love this bit where
we want nothing to do.
He says we wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Nobody needs NATO more than France. You just look back over the last long period of time.
So he's ribbing the French here over the World War II, getting attacked,
and frankly,
and getting
the one that benefits
defeated by Germany
really the least
in 3 weeks
is the United States. We benefit the least. We're helping Europe. Europe unites and they go against a common foe. That may or may not be a foe. Can't tell you that. But there are other foes out there also. But I think nobody needs it more than France, and that's why I think that when France makes a statement like they made about NATO, it's a very dangerous statement for them to make. But I do.
Okay, so his thing is, look, after what happened to France in the Second World War, they should be the last ones who should be complaining about NATO and building alliances with other countries. So he's ribbing. He doesn't. Varnish his words. I mean, the guy, there's nothing subtle about what this guy does or says. He's coming at you with both barrels every single time he opens his mouth. Miles?
What's funny to me about NATO is it was only about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big NATO summit here, in Chicago, and there were major protests against NATO. So you have a huge, protest of NATO here in the United States, And then, Trump comes out with all his criticisms of NATO as he's running for president and while he's president, and yet you don't hear anything from those protesters about NATO. It's like if Trump's against something, then you kind of have the people be quiet about their own problems with that organization too. Granted, a lot of them were protesting NATO for, maybe different reasons, but still.
What's the state of the Democrats now? It seems like when I see Trump, body language-wise, and I don't know how much of that is real, but the guy has more confidence than I've ever seen him. I mean, he just seems to go in there 100% gangbusters, has no fear about being impeached, no fear about losing the election. It's just he's 100% confident. Does he have reason for that confidence based on what you've seen from the Democrats now with Bloomberg jumping into the race and now with Hillary? I guess, at one point, still thinking about it? Is that what's going on there?
I imagine he's very confident he'll win. I mean, the Electoral College is definitely in his favor. Every one of these candidates, minus Tulsi Gabbard, every one of these candidates has major flaws. We talked about how Pete Buttigieg has no support in the African American community. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's a proven liar. Kamala Harris has a horrible track record. And the biggest thing about it, I'm just surprised by, is that the Democrats aren't roundly rejecting certain people like Joe Biden. The fact that he's actually, in the lead with his 30% when 70% of the party is against him, or the fact that Bloomberg, who supported stop and frisk, was big into stop and frisk, isn't being rejected more. It's just the fact that they have these really, really, really bad candidates, and the party is just kind of like, well, if he ends up being the guy, he's going to be my guy, and it's just like.
Last question while I got you on the line, out of left field, Ruth Bader Ginsberg, I guess back in hospital, or has she been released from hospital? I don't know, but clearly not a well lady, and aged, at the risk of sounding crass here, if she dies, at this stage in the Trump presidency, does he make a move to replace her? And what can he expect in the way? I mean, we saw what happened with Brett Kavanaugh. It was a battle royale.
Oh, yeah. It would be exactly like that. He wouldn't wait at all to replace her. It would be a lot like that. I mean, maybe you could argue that he would wait till after the election because that'd be easier for him in some way. But considering what happened the last time around, he would probably pick another person, and the Democrats would shoot themselves in the foot, and all the Democrats running for Senate or Democratic senators running for president would use it to, try to make themselves known. And the thing about Ruth Bader Ginsburg that's so weird, I don't get, is she has become this pop culture icon in the United States. There's a movie about her that came out recently. I was literally just Christmas shopping the other day. They've got like a cartoon calendar with her. I've seen Ruth Bader Ginsburg as like RBG and like little like figurines. Like she is this pop culture figure of the last 2 or 3 years down here, and it doesn't make any sense. It's like ask these same people, it's like what is a case that she ruled on? What specifically about her is it that people like so much? And it's just like, what, because she's a woman on the Supreme Court? She's not the only woman on the Supreme Court, because,
yeah, you got Sotomayor.
I don't see what the major appeal is about her. It's just like the Democrats are just kind of using her as a figurehead.
Well, I guess she's a liberal. And she's progressive. I think maybe that's why they see her as somebody that they can rally behind. I don't know, but it would be interesting if anything happens to her over the next month or two, if she even makes it into the new year. She could hold on, but it would be interesting to see, because of course there is that sort of rule that presidents don't appoint somebody in the last year or half a year of their mandate. I think Obama had a similar issue, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think Trump really follows rules.
Miles, thank you so much. Really appreciate this, as always.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Miles Kristen from Wisconsin International Radio, coming to us from Madison in the great state of Wisconsin.